Tonight, we travel into a case so disturbing, so baffling, and so psychologically tangled that even decades later, the woman at the center of it insists she remembers absolutely nothing. A quiet California home, a mother for sleeping children, and a night that would fracture a community, stun investigators, and create one of the most chilling criminal mysteries modern courts have ever seen. You may think you know where the story is going, but trust me, you don't. Not yet, because this is not a straightforward tale of guilt and motive. This is a labyrinth of broken memories, alleged abuse, conflicting testimonies, and a survival story so improbable, prosecutors could hardly believe the woman lived to stand trial. And you, yes, you watching right now will need to decide, was this the act of a monster, a victim pushed past a breaking point, or a mental collapse buried beneath layers of trauma? In the late 1990s, the Caro family lived in a seemingly ordinary home in Santa Clarita, California. Neighbors described them as quiet, private, almost invisible in the day-to-day flow of the suburb. Socorro Caro, the mother at the center of this case, was known for her gentle voice and her attentive nature with her 4 young boys. She was not described as violent, not erratic, not someone who would explode in rage. If anything, she seemed almost fragile. Her husband, Gonzalo Caro, worked long hours. Outwardly, he was seen as a traditional father, strict, reserved, authoritative. But behind closed doors? Well, that depends on who you ask. Socorro would later claim years of physical and emotional abuse. Gonzalo denied it. Friends were split. Family members whispered. Court documents hinted. But no single, unified truth ever surfaced. And that uncertainty, that contradiction, will follow us throughout the story. But before you judge, before you fill the silence with assumptions, remember something. Trauma hides in plain sight, and so does danger. Before everything shattered, witnesses described Socorro as tired, withdrawn, and anxious. She mentioned arguments at home. She confided in a friend that she felt trapped. Another recalled her muttering, "I don't know how much more I can take." But here's the strange part. No one reported screaming, fights, or meltdowns. No police visits. No obvious red flags. It was a quiet storm. Silent, internal, one that no one saw forming until it was too late. It was the early morning hours of November 2001, a night investigators would later describe as quiet too quiet. The children had gone to bed. Socorro tucked them in, gave good night kisses, turned off the lights. What happened next remains a void, an empty space in the timeline that no witness, no recording, and no surviving memory has ever been able to fill completely. Later, Socorro would claim, "I don't remember anything." Investigators didn't believe her. Prosecutors called it convenient amnesia. Her defense pointed to trauma-induced dissociation. But let's hold that thought. The facts we do know are chilling, even without describing any graphic detail. 3 of the 4 young sons died as they slept. The youngest, just 1-year-old, survived without injury, and after the devastating violence, Socorro attempted to take her own life. She suffered a gunshot wound to the head, severe enough to require 2 surgeries. Yet somehow, she survived. How does a person perform such deliberate actions and then forget everything? Is that possible? Medically? Psychologically? Or is it a mask, a shield, a lie? Hold on to that question as we delve deeper. When police arrived, the house was cold and still. Officers later described the silence as unnatural, the kind of silence that feels heavy, as though the air itself knows something terrible has happened. Investigators moved to the hallways with a level of caution normally reserved for active crime scenes. But this was different. The threat was over, but the emotional weight remained. They found Socorro gravely injured but alive, barely conscious, blood pressure dropping, breathing shallow. Her pulse weakened, then flickered back again. Paramedics rushed her out, unsure if she would live long enough to reveal what happened. Back inside, officers were left with an overwhelming sense of disbelief. One detective later said, "It was the quietest house I've ever walked into, and that's what made it the loudest memory I still carry." Even hardened investigators struggled. Some left the room to steady themselves. Others stared blankly, unable to process what they were seeing. No one spoke above a whisper that entire night. And it didn't take long for suspicion to turn squarely toward Socorro. There were no signs of forced entry, no weapons missing, no suspects fleeing the scene, no defensive struggle pointing to an intruder. And then there were the medical reports. Socorro had survived a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Her injury placement, the angle, the fact she lived through it. To detectives, the puzzle pieces aligned into one conclusion. She was both a suspect and a surviving witness. But here's the twist. Nothing about Socorro's past behavior suggested such an act. No threats, no violent record, no hints of harming her children. But there were signs of something else happening beneath the surface. Her attorneys later revealed her claims of physical abuse by her husband. The defense argued she was emotionally broken. The prosecution argued she was manipulative. After waking from surgery, Socorro was questioned. Her response was consistent across every interview. "I don't remember. I don't remember anything. I don't remember that night." Doctors tested her. Psychologists analyzed her. Specialists debated whether trauma-induced amnesia could explain the blackout. Some experts said yes. Some said absolutely not. Others shrugged, uncertain, claiming it depends. But in court, prosecutors were firm. A mother killing her children is nearly always accompanied by psychological crisis, postpartum depression, psychosis, documented instability, or pre-existing threats. But Socorro had none of those on record. And then there were her inconsistent comments about abuse. Did she make them up to justify the crime? Or did the crime emerge from years of invisible suffering? This ambiguity formed the heart of the trial. The courtroom was suffocatingly quiet the day the trial began. Reporters spoke in hushed tones. Families sat rigid, unable to look away. Even the judge seemed tense, as though aware this case would leave a permanent mark on the state's legal history. Socorro sat at the defense table, hair pulled back, thin, pale, her facial injury still faintly visible beneath makeup. She barely spoke, barely blinked. She appeared as fragile as the image her supporters believed, or as cold as prosecutors painted her. Her husband, Gonzalo, testified against her. His demeanor was stern, controlled. But witnesses described tension, like two worlds colliding silently inside the courtroom. Prosecutors argued that Socorro acted out of revenge. Defense attorneys countered with claims of abuse and mental collapse. One line from the prosecution stuck with the jury. The children were asleep. They never even had a chance to understand what was happening. Defense attorneys objected, but the damage had been done. Even without graphic descriptions, the emotional weight was devastating. And yet, this case was not clear-cut. On a tense afternoon, the jury returned with their decision. Guilty. Socorro Caro was convicted of murder. Her sentence, 3 consecutive life terms, a total of 23 years, 7 months, and 18 days before she would even be eligible for parole. In that moment, she didn't cry. She didn't scream. She didn't collapse. She simply nodded as if she expected this outcome from the very beginning. And perhaps she did. There's a part of this story often overlooked. The youngest child survived. A toddler, 1 year old at the time. Too young to understand. Too young to remember. Too young to testify. He grew up carrying the weight of a night he cannot recall. And as for Socorro, she has spent years behind bars, maintaining the same stance. She has no memory of that night. She insists abuse shaped her mental state. She claims she would never have harmed her children consciously. Her appeals have been exhausted. Her final petition, submitted to United States Supreme Court, was denied in 2020. For Socorro, the legal path is closed, but the questions remain. Now, let me turn directly to you, watching this. Stories like this are uncomfortable, not because of gore, This story needs no graphic detail. It's unsettling because it forces us to examine the fragile fabric of the human mind. So tell me, and answer honestly, even if just in your own thoughts, do you believe Socorro's memory gap? Could severe trauma erase an entire sequence of actions? Or does her claim conveniently protect her from acknowledging the worst moment of her life? And what about the allegations of abuse? Were they real, exaggerated, fabricated, or a psychological shield her brain created to hide from the truth? There is no simple answer. No neat box to place this case into. Experts who studied the case argued endlessly over a single question. Why? Filicide, when a parent harms a child, is extremely rare and usually follows recognizable patterns. Psychosis, delusions, severe depression, command hallucinations, postpartum disorders. But Socorro did not fit neatly into any category. Her psychological assessments were contradictory. Some said she was detached. Others said she was traumatized. Some saw signs of emotional instability. Others saw none. Her case has since been used in academic discussions revolving around trauma-induced amnesia, emotional dissociation, covert domestic abuse, rare rage responses, mental collapse under chronic stress. To this day, no single psychological theory fully explains what happened, and that is what makes this case unforgettable. Usually, in true crime stories, there is closure, a confession, a clear motive, a breakthrough piece of evidence, a guilty plea, a solved riddle. Not here. Socorro Caro's case sits in the shadows, half-truths, half-memories, half-answers. 3 young lives were taken. 1 survived. A mother lives with permanent physical and emotional scars. A father carries grief and anger that will never fade. A community still whispers about a night they cannot comprehend. And us, we are left to wonder, was this a moment of madness, a result of hidden abuse, a psychological collapse, or a deliberate act fueled by rage and desperation? The courts chose one answer, but the truth may never be fully known. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Untold Crime. If this story made you think, if it left you questioning the fragile complexities of the human mind, then don't worry, there are more mysteries to uncover, more shadows to explore, more truths hiding in the dark corners of real cases. Hit subscribe, tap the notification bell, and join us next time as we follow another trail deep into the unknown. And always remember, the darkest crimes often hide behind the quietest doors.